So we're back, and let's begin this session. And please make sure that if you have any questions, you can definitely write it down using your chat options, and you can ask any doubts that you have about your portfolio. And we are definitely going to go through a lot of information today. So let's start the session by understanding how the US political system works. And it's one of the most important things because what we understand is there's a president who takes the decisions. But we must also know that there are three branches of US government as per the constitution, and all these three branches have different powers. So one is the legislative branch, which makes the law, and then there is the executive branch, which carries out the law, and then there is judicial branch, which evaluate the laws. So when we talk about the legislatives which are making the laws, we are talking about Congress. Congress have two parts. One is Senate, and then there is House of Representatives. So as you can see that there are 100 senators and there are 435 members in the House of Representatives. And when we see overall, the impact of each of these house is very significant. When we talk about senators and we are looking at 100 senators which are voted, the senators elections happen every 6 years, and these are at least 30 years old to begin with. And as we know about Congress, this is the branch which is making the laws, right? We talk about representatives again. Every 2 years, the House of Representative elections happen, and together, Congress and representatives, House of Representatives, they make the legislation. The senators and the representatives, they make together the Congress, and Congress is really important for making out the laws. Now, carries out the law, which is the executive branch, that's the president, which is elected every 4 years. The president has a vice president, and then there is a cabinet which helps to carry out these laws, followed by a judicial system, which is Supreme Court, which has nine um, uh, judicial justices, and then there are other federal courts which are available. So these three branches together form the American political system. Now, what do we have vis-a-vis understanding that how US elections would work? We need to understand, first of all, the most important dates which are going to come across. So there are two candidates at the moment. There is Republican former president. Also in 2016, we all know that how Donald Trump became the president by defeating Hillary Clinton. And then in 2020, he lost to Joe Biden, who became the president after that. But President Donald Trump, who is the former Republican president, and then vice president, and now a Democrat candidate, Kamala Harris, is going to be facing Donald Trump in the US elections, and they will face each other on November 5th. That is when the US elections would happen. And if we see the timeline, because now the presidential debates have already happened, two presidential debates occurred, and it already happened. So 5th of November is going to be the election day. It normally take a few days for the election results to be known, especially if it is too close or mail-in ballots are a factor. Uh, After 25 days or after 20 days, normally we understand that how other things will be carried out. Um, every single time when elections happen, we have seen an amount of volatility which occurs. And that's really important because once the election happens and the results are out, eventually the next month, around January, the inauguration of the election winner happens, the vice president takes place, and then officially the president and the vice president, they're officially sworn into the office. So this is somewhere we are understanding that when elections will occur on 5th of November, we might see a lot of volatility happening. We might see a lot of fluctuations happening. And this is what is going to be the most important part. There are going to be some we can discuss about some worst case scenarios which can happen in US elections. Could this be a repeat of 2016, or Trump can come back as a president now, is a very popular question. So there are a lot of things. I mean, from important issues um, following Trump and Kamala Harris, whether you talk about economy, you talk about inflation, you talk about healthcare, you talk about immigration, gun violence, abortion policies. Both these candidates have their respective view, and that is the reason why um, it's important that uh, we should study that what will be the impact on your portfolio if Trump comes, or if Senator Kamala Harris comes in. Each candidate needs to win um, around 270 seats, and that is the majority. 270 electoral votes will be required to win the elections, and either of the candidate who wins these votes, they take the elections, and they are the ones who win, and then further policies can be defined. At the same time, this time the vote for Congress is also due. So senators, representatives, the voting will happen for them. It's important. Why? Because um, legislative, senators and House of Representatives, there's a possibility that the president is a Democrat or Republican, but the legislative is a mix. And sometimes it becomes difficult because if the lawmakers, if the Congress is a Republican and there is a Democrat president, or vice versa, it may not be an easy path for the president to carry out all the laws he wants to. So that is the reason why it's important that while the presidential elections happen and the Congress elections happen, we must have a look at both, because if Congress is completely Republican and there is a Democrat president, so the president might have a very limited power to carry out laws, given um, if Congress does not clear the laws or does not pass on to the bill. So this is something which is important, and this is something which is more focused upon when the elections happen. Not just the White House elections for the president, but also elections for the legislative. And that is why all of us will be looking closely on 5th of November what happens next, and the how markets are going to react. Now, um, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have done presidential debates, and the 2024 presidential election is going to give voters a very stark choice between these two candidates. And obviously, they are very different on a number of policies. And we're going to have a look at, first of all, what these policies are. But before that, let's try to understand about these issues and their stand by both the candidates. And then I'll take you through which sectors could get benefited if Kamala Harris comes into presidency, or which sectors could get benefited if Donald Trump becomes the president. So let's understand right now who's leading the national polls. Kamala Harris is ahead of Donald Trump in the national polling averages. And in the months of leading up to Biden's decision, so Joe Biden, who is a former president and the current president at the moment, dropped out from the presidential race after the first debate. And Kamala Harris uh, went on to carry the further baton to the president, to the U.S. presidential elections. And now Kamala Harris is the direct candidate standing in front of Donald Trump. And the second presidential debate, which happened, kind of brought more voters for Kamala Harris, and the race has tightened up. And there is a small lead which Kamala Harris has taken on the polls, and as we see that elections and the polls are very close, so it's very difficult to say that which candidate is going to win. But then, for in our side, we need to evaluate the sectors which are going to get benefited. Now let's understand their views on different kind of stance. And it's important. Why? Because a lot of these topics or a lot of these issues in US, these are discussed upon the presidential debates. Now let's take example of TikTok, right? And you know that when we talk about these issues, depends on who becomes the president, it decides what will happen further to these kind of issues. So whether it is democracy or economy or education or foreign policy or social issues, we need to be aware of what is the stand which is taken by both of these presidents. So TikTok, for example. Now, while Kamala Harris believes that they should divest or ban TikTok, Trump is inconsistent. So Trump is inconsistent on the issue because August 2020, which was a few months before the last election, which happened in 2020, Trump issued an order that would have banned TikTok in US, and that was because of the national security concerns. But then the court stepped in and halted that ban. 4 years later, Joe Biden again prepared to sign the tough TikTok bill into the law. Right now, in case of Kamala Harris, um, she has not much spent time talking about TikTok, but then she has supported the bill which Joe Biden signed in April that could ban the social media TikTok from US after the elections. Now, there are a lot of administration officials. They have warned that Chinese government's access to TikTok's algorithms and user data makes it a national security threat. That's what Trump also talked about last time, that it's because of the national security, the algorithm which TikTok is using, that can be accessed by the Chinese government. And that is why it's a national issue, and that's why it should be banned. So the new law which forces TikTok's Chinese owner to sell it to a US business or face a ban, it comes 2 years after Joe Biden barred nearly all of the 4 million federal workers from using TikTok on the government devices. So this is something which has been an important issue also. If you see from a wider perspective, you are thinking that who cares about TikTok? But then when it comes to national security, both of them have a stance on talking about banning this company. But later on, if you have seen in June, Trump joined TikTok, posting a video of himself attending a UFC event and calling it an honor to be on the app. Now, that's where things have changed when it comes to Donald Trump. Earlier, while he issued an executive order that would have banned TikTok in US, from there to coming back and posting himself on TikTok and talking about it, how it is an honor to be on the app. So there is again a slight difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump when it comes to understanding about TikTok, right? And it's about revenue. It's about how China would retaliate if a company which is making so much revenue bans TikTok. At this point of time, it's not a small app, it's a trend. So again, that depends on how the elections turn out, and that is why I said that's a difference between the opinions and it's difference between the ideologies. Now, moving on to the other part, which is immigration. Now, when we talk about immigration, it has been a serious issue. Kamala Harris, she backs something called bipartisan bill, while Trump promises a crackdown on migration. Even the campaign website of Donald Trump, it says that President Trump will shut down Biden's border disaster. Right? If you remember back in 2016, Trump was very popular in talking about we are going to build a wall in front of Mexico so the immigrants cannot enter. And again, there have been further slogans about remain in Mexico or eliminate asylum fraud. And Trump will deputize the National Guard and local law enforcement to assist with rapidly moving illegal alien gang members and criminals. So, this is what the immigration policy for Donald Trump is. As far as Kamala Harris is concerned, again, she wants to go to the root cause of the Central American migration. She has repeatedly said that she opposes the family separation, favors allowing undocumented spouses of US citizens to apply for a green card. And they have a bipartisan bill, and that bipartisan bill would raise the bar for asylum seekers to enter the country and to be approved. So anybody who wants to seek asylum to US, a bill would be passed under Kamala Harris's jurisdiction, where they can enter to the country and be approved, and gives the president more power to turn away new arrivals if immigration level hits certain triggers. So, in case of Kamala Harris and Democrats, they will allow the immigrants to come if somebody is seeking asylum. But at the same time, the bipartisan bill, which Kamala Harris backs up, it gives president more power to turn away the new arrivals if migration level hit certain triggers. So Kamala Harris has voted against Trump's border wall, but obviously her view is much more wider in this. In case of Donald Trump, he's pretty much closed to the idea of rapidly allowing people to enter into United States, while Kamala Harris um, approves a bipartisan bill and backs a bipartisan bill, which will give president more powers to control that migration, but at the same time, it will allow people to seek asylum in US if they are in need to. So again, a major difference between the immigration policies between two. Then we talk about climate change. We have seen back in the past that Donald Trump does not really support climate change at all. He still feels that the environmental regulations which are put on the company should be relaxed. And he wants to cut down the regulations, withdraw from these international climate treaties. He did withdraw from the Paris Agreement in the early months of his administration back in 2016. And the environmental regulations, which included emission and pollution controls for coal fired power plants, he did kind of relax those regulations. And the argument was very simple, that jobs are not being able to create because the cost increases. And again, there has been a certain disregard for climate change at that particular time. They focus more on bringing fossil fuels, and he supports bringing fossil fuels into action, more oil and natural gas projects, right? So again, the idea is that Trump's opposition towards Green Deal policies are there, and he designs to shut down the development of the green energy or renewables, basically, if we know it. While Democrats are very separate, if you look at Kamala Harris and if we look at their ideologies, they're prioritizing the climate policy. Kamala Harris has backed the Green New Deal climate change during the 2019 presidential bid. She has supported banning the fracking and offshore drilling to bring more fossils. So she has banned and she has supported that ban. And again, as we have discussed, that Democrats follow the global climate pact. She has supported the return of US into the Paris Agreement, which Joe Biden rejoined on the first day in the office. And a lot of support has been shown towards the use of electric vehicles and renewables, and investing in global climate summit. So if you see towards renewables and fossils, Republicans are more focused on bringing fossils back into action, while Democrats are looking more towards uh, a climate change policy where they continue to be the part of Paris climate deal, and support banning the fracking and drilling of oil shows, and try to identify more abundant sources of energy. So that's where the difference comes in. Coming back to the healthcare part, Affordable Care Act, again, both the candidates have a very different perspective. While Kamala Harris, as Democrat, feels that there should be larger role for government in Affordable Care Act. Um, the belief of Democrats comes across where Democrats feel that everybody should be able to afford healthcare, and this is something which has been talked a lot about in Joe Biden's government governance and Barack Obama's governance. Also, both of them were Democrats, and the Biden White House has called for extending the Affordable Care Act subsidies, which are set to expire of 2025. And Kamala Harris has taken very aggressive positions on healthcare in the past, and they have their own versions of larger role for private insurance. But then the major idea behind Democrats is that the healthcare should be affordable to everyone. Now, Donald Trump want to change this Affordable Care Act, As a president, Donald Trump did fight to eliminate this Affordable Care Act completely, and even he did succeed at zeroing out the individual mandate penalty for not carrying insurance. And more recently, he has become softened. I mean, he has talked about how Affordable Care Act can be improved, but not to terminate it. And as at this point of time, there are no laws or rules he has talked about that how he's going to improve it. But knowing Donald Trump, I think he's more inclined towards changing it or removing it completely. Um, at the previous years, we have seen that he has tried to replace Affordable Care Act, and he has criticized his party candidates, Republicans, who didn't want to terminate it and never gave up. So, when it comes to healthcare, while Democrats believe that should be available to everyone, and they have a larger role for private insurance in this, Donald Trump also has talked about improving the Affordable Care Act and not terminate it. But as of now, the his campaign has not really talked about that how he is going to do it. Then comes another critical issue, which is abortion. Abortion, again, uh, Trump used to support abortion rights, but then once he started running for 2016 president, he has proudly taken credit for uh, opposing the issue, and a national abortion ban was being endorsed. Uh, and then this is where Donald Trump has announced, um, and he has supported states' right on abortion procedures. And again, he would not sign a federal ban, but as a president, he supported a 20-week federal ban, and that happened when he was the president. And this is something which is again a very critical issue. A Republicans normally have not supported abortion policies, and Donald Trump has been no stranger to this. I think, as I said, that during his presidential run, he had been seen flirting with the idea of banning uh, abortion, and that is something which has happened a lot of times. In case of Kamala Harris and Democrats, again, two very different things which we have seen. Admitted the struggles of the issue, but she has talked about um, that abortion policies will be looked into, and they want to put back in place the protections which Supreme Court took away, and there are laws which are to be meant. And again, the idea is that when abortion policies come out between in this particular presidential debate, we have seen Republican stance to be very strong towards no abortions versus abortion. So this is something which we have observed between Democrats and Republicans, and it affects healthcare, it affects farmers, it affects healthcare policies also. So again, two different stances. Now, very talked about issues which as Israel and Gaza. Now, here is where the foreign policies also come into the picture, and it's not a easy topic to issue about to talk about. But in Donald Trump, he's looking at a faster end to the war, and he has so many times insisted that Israel never would have happened if Donald Trump was the president. And he has talked about that how he's going to give a very quick end to the war. And while there is some criticism from Kamala Harris, she has backed the Biden administrator's fundamental approach to the war in Gaza Strip, pushed for de-escalation, tried to broker a ceasefire, try to bring the hostages back, promote a kind of two-state solution. But again, she has argued for Israel's right to self-defense and elimination of Hamas. There are some signs which has been again shown. So there is a slight difference over here which we have seen between the Republicans and the Democrats. And as we see, even in July, she skipped the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to the Congress. Now, here, this is a very important thing because the issue which we are looking at right now, it is true that during Trump's tenure, we did not see such issues happening. And this only started during Joe Biden's presidency. So I think right now Donald Trump has not articulated any plans for the peace in Middle East. But then his idea is to end this war as soon as possible. There has been no support from either of the parties, but then this is where they stand vis-a-vis the important issues related to foreign policies. Now, one more important thing before we move on to these areas, we are looking at the taxes part of it. Now, when we talk about taxes, this is also very important because Donald Trump want to extend tax cuts with the corporates. They basically want to bring down the corporate taxes, which is 21%. At least he wants to bring it down to 15%. At the same time, Kamala Harris want to unwind the tax cuts which Trump did. Joe Biden, he called for unwinding tax breaks for Americans making more than $400,000. Raised, please remember this, and note this down. Joe Biden raised the corporate tax from 21 to 28%, right? Um, Minimum 25% minimum tax on billionaires. And it's not yet clear which parts Kamala Harris is going to carry over what Joe Biden has made. But if you see Donald Trump, he plans on extending these tax cuts. And this is something which he wants to do, bring down the corporate tax from 21 to 15%, and push the corporates higher. I think that is one reason that why stock markets normally move higher, and it did move higher between 2016 to 2020 during Trump's tenure. Lastly, on an issue of electric vehicles, EV is one of those important areas where both of these candidates have spoken. And while Kamala Harris prioritizes electric vehicles, Trump is something, a sort of a threat to the auto industry. He's not against electric vehicles, as he has said, but has kind of portrayed them as less reliable than the vehicles which require fuel, right? In case of Kamala Harris, we have seen the prioritizing electric vehicles. In her 2020 campaign, she called for ramping up EV production, something that has become a sort of cornerstone for Biden's presidency. And again, as I say, that they are mostly talking about prioritizing the EVs, while Trump kind of is a threat to the auto industry. As I said, that he has never talked about being against the electric vehicles, but then most of the time he has portrayed that EV are less reliable as compared to the gas powered um, cars. So this is something which is again an important issue to look at because there are so many EV companies and EV manufacturers, and that could get impacted depending on which president comes into the picture. Right. So now here we have talked about the important issues. Now let's try to understand how US elections have impacted back in the past. I'm going to share my screen with you so that um, here I'm going to share something really important information. Let's try to understand the seasonality. And this is something which is really important. Look at this. Hope everybody can see this right now. The presidential election seasonality. Now, in this, we are going to discuss today about how during US elections markets have performed, right? And as I said, politics and global markets, when they collide, uncertainty, volatility, it's always there. So if you are trading stocks or indices or currencies, there will always be a risk. There are so many political events, like US elections is the most important one. And these kind of events can add an extra layer of complexity, right? Outcome of the elections could be anything, but then when we are looking at how it has performed historically, let's try to understand. So the one in the blue are the election years, and the one which are orange are the non-election years. And look at month-on-month seasonality of uh, the markets. So this is the performance of uh, S&P 500. I think so. If you look at this, since 1970, now please look at this data very closely. Since 1970, October and November have portrayed a very contrasting difference between election and non-election years. So if you see October, during election years, the markets have gone down. Non-election years, we have seen markets going up, right? So if you see in October during election years, S&P on an average has come down by 1.7%. But at the same time, in November, during the election years, it has gained around 2.1%. And if you see non-election years, in October, the index has gone up by 1.6%, 1.65, and again 1.68% in November. So, regardless, September has been a negative month, resulting in negative returns of zero point 0.4 or 1.2%. So, if you see September, whether it is election year or non-election year, irrespective, S&P has mostly shown a decline in the month of September. This is called understanding the seasonality of the index. Now, look at this. So, I'm showing you the seasonality right now, the chart over here. Seasonality summary since 1970. So, on the left column, you see the average returns and the maximum return and the minimum return. If you see the horizontal axis, which shows the months. So, if you see month on month, September since 1970, on an average, has given 0.96% decline. Minimum, which we have seen the maximum loss is 11.9%. Profit has been around 8.76%. And if you see the months, like for example, Jan, Feb, March, April, May, June, July, August, on an average, they have shown positive growth in terms of seasonality. And this is month on month seasonality. So we are looking since 1970. Now, the US elections are due in November 2024, providing an opportunity for investors. So, as we see in the last 13 election years, S&P has performed poorly before the election, has given negative returns, right, in September and October. But then the index gains in November, portraying a return of 2.1%. So, of the 13 years, index was red in 7 periods in September and 8 times in October, right? So, this is where we need to understand that whenever the elections happen, we sometimes see a contrasting impact, that just before the election we see markets coming down, and then again in November it recovers. Dip in the months before the election provides a potential opportunity for a lot of investors to enter into a buying position. Or when September and October, when markets come down, you could buy during that time and then ride that momentum in November when the market recovers, right? So this is election years, some seasonality. This is the seasonality since 1970. This is the election years seasonality which you see, right? Look at this. So every time, if you see September and October, majority of the signs have shown red, and then again it recovers in November and December. So if you see a dip in September and October in S&P 500, could be a good entry point to buy. And then again in November, we have seen that markets recover during the election. So that is where the seasonality comes in. And now, obviously, don't put all your money at once into S&P 500. There are ladder strategies which are used, which can provide a potential opportunity. So let's say, for example, this is a portfolio which is made for $1 million, but you decide the amount, how much you want to put. Whatever is the total investment amount, you enter first with 25% of that, right? With which is the current market price. If there is a fall, let's say another fall of maybe 5%, enter with the remaining 35%. And then if there is another fall of say 10%, you can enter with 40% of your remaining investment. So even when you are buying an index, a ladder approach is something which is very good idea when you're not really sure of the event, because US elections is an event which could take you anywhere, which can move your portfolio anywhere. So instead of putting all the money at once, you try to use a ladder approach. You enter with your 25% of your total expected investment. If it falls down by 5%, you enter again. If it falls down by 10%, you enter finally. So you divide your money into different amounts, and then start with a lower percentage to begin with, and then move into higher, and then move into further higher. So this is something which you can look into while we are uh, waiting for elections or looking at how to do this. Now, I'm going to share one more idea with you, and this is going to be slightly different from what we have discussed. Let me share my screen right away. This is going to be about understanding a few companies. So Trump wants his Biden rematch. Now, this was a rematch, but obviously Biden got out of the presidential race. But now there is Kamala Harris, which is getting in. So, um, 2024 US elections, it's going to be the 60th quadrennial presidential election set to be held on 5th November. Um, Now there is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and mostly Kamala Harris, who's going to be the candidate now. And there are two parties which are going to come across the elections. Out of 538 electoral votes, one of the candidate who's going to win needs a majority of 270. And these electoral votes are distributed among 50 states. Now, Republicans, as we have known, they are known for the pro-business stance, which means they like um, to cut down the corporate taxes. They like to push the stock markets higher by doing um, constructing policies which favors the businesses. Democrats, they position themselves to the left of the Republicans, so emphasizing more on social equality, right? So Republicans, they favor stock market more than Democratic presidents. And there are two scenarios: either Donald Trump becomes the president or Kamala Harris becomes the president. Strategic recommendation. Now, where do we stand vis-a-vis understanding which stocks can get benefited? This is most important part of the entire discussion over here. That given the same, a few sectors of the stock markets are expected to face volatility, right? Investor attention. If during Trump's presidency, which are the stocks which could get benefited? Because Trump talks more about securing the borders, the arms and ammunition companies like Lockheed Martin, um, Tesla, surprisingly, because is not very psyched about renewables. But then I think recently there was a tweet between Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and I think it's more of a Elon Musk factor than the EV about Tesla. So we have put Tesla, which can be bought, Chevron, which is a energy oil company, Simon Property Group, Trump Media and Technology Group, which is Trump's phase, uh, Trump's version of Twitter. Then there is a small cap index fund, which is iShares Russell 2000 ETF, and then Coinbase Global, which is a crypto exchange based stock. These are the companies which are expected to get benefited. On the other side, the stocks which might go down if Trump becomes the president: First Solar, which is a solar energy based company, CVS Health, Tencent, which is again a Chinese company, PDD Holdings. So these are the companies which are expected to go down. Now, we are going to look at all these companies also, and we are understanding the rationale behind why we are looking at these companies. Similarly, if Kamala Harris becomes the president, First Solar, CVS, Rivian, Nvidia, these kind of companies are expected to perform well. But Chevron, Altria, all these kind of companies are expected to go down. Now, if I were to look more closely towards this, um, during Donald Trump's presidency, the scenario, the sectors which we are looking at is aerospace and defense, automobiles, oil, gas, retail REITs, small cap funds, capital markets, semiconductors, healthcare, broadline retail, and interactive media. These sectors we are expecting to go down if Trump becomes the president. But the ones which are expected to go higher is companies like Tesla and Chevron and aerospace and defense companies. In case of Kamala Harris, again, semiconductors, healthcare, automobiles, these are the areas which you're expecting will perform well. Oil and gas, tobacco, leisure of products, these kind of companies or sectors might go down. As of 12th July, Trump had a 57% chance in victory. Uh, Biden had 15, but obviously we are moving much forward now. So I showed you the current polls where Kamala Harris has replaced, and she's inching towards a lead, a very close lead. I mean, I would say it does not count as a lead, but still very close. Now, why we have looked into these areas? So let's understand the rationale at why we are looking at these areas. Considering the Trump presidency, companies that could benefit from Trump's policies, uh, infrastructure, defense companies like Lockheed Martin, um, Trump Media and Technology, which is owned by uh, Donald Trump, it might also go up. Small cap companies are expected to do well because they have historically performed well under Republican administrations. Because Trump's tax policies will benefit a lot of these companies which have high effective tax rates. Real estate stocks like Simon Property Group, because Trump has a background in real estate. So these kind of companies might also go up because the policies for real estate might become more favorable. Oil companies like Chevron, which are in oil and gas, could also get benefited because Trump has supported fossil fuels in the industry. Sectors that could get affected in a negative way if Trump becomes a president, we are talking about clean energy companies like First Solar. Trump does not favor green energy or EV companies. So um, again, this can benefit Tesla. Why? Because Trump has talked about rolling back the subsidies, which affects the EV imports into US. Now, Tesla is a US-based EV company. So if there are, for example, not motivation for EV imports, then Tesla gets benefited because then the regional EVs, which is made by Tesla, they get more um, uh, considered. So demand for Tesla increases. So that's why Tesla stock might get benefited. Healthcare companies like CVS again might see some headwinds because Trump is more focused on removing the Affordable Care Act. Technology companies which are relying on global supply chains also could feel the impact of the trade policies, because last time we saw that how Donald Trump put import duties on foreign goods and the imports were affected. It started a trade war between US and China, right? So these are some sectors which could get impacted. Trump has expressed a lot of support for cryptos back in the past, um, pledging not to use any regulatory authority against Bitcoin. So cryptos might get benefited if Trump comes into presidency. Plus, a lot of crypto donations have been coming across for his campaign. So that again has increased the interest in digital assets by Donald Trump and again cryptocurrency platforms. So that is the reason why Coinbase is in that list. Now, when it comes to Kamala Harris's candidature, they have more focused on the healthcare reforms. So companies like CVS are expected to get benefit. They have pledged to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, so propose clean energy policies. So First Solar, Rivian Automobile, these kind of companies are expected to get more weightage. Um, $1 trillion infrastructure plan, which could benefit companies involved in infrastructure products. Uh, More commitment to increasing science and tech research. So companies like Nvidia might get better. And again, policies to increase the minimum wage, tax relief for the middle class may positively impact the consumer discretionary companies. Their stand have been more aggressive towards rising climate change. So fossil fuel industry Chevron or any another energy companies might get impacted if Kamala Harris comes into presidency. Um, they have supported for ending private prisons, which could impact business operating in the private prison sector. They have talked about reducing the defense budget, which can impact the companies like Lockheed Martin. So you see, win for one is a loss for another, and that is why the companies which we are looking at right now, um, if Donald Trump comes, the same companies which we are expecting will go up. If Kamala Harris comes, those kind of companies might just come down. That's the opposite contrast for these kind of companies. So once again, this is one portfolio which currently we are looking at, and obviously as and when the polling progresses and we get to know uh, whose are the chances to become um, the president, and as and when the date approaches, it is going to make markets more and more volatile. So we have to come up with more and more ideas and portfolios which we can look into. uh, Before we end the session, I would also like to show you a current um, sector shift from large cap to small cap. There's a lot of sector rotation at the moment, which we have seen, and lower market value companies or smaller market value companies. Back in the past, we have seen that they have performed well during Trump's era, and that is another reason that why it may not be the worst idea to invest into smaller market value companies if Donald Trump is expected to become the president. And just to again give you an idea, uh, in the beginning of 2024, the investors were much focused on stocks like Nvidia and others, because the demand for AI uh, captured the attention of every investor. So everybody would want to invest into Amazon and Nvidia and Apple and Alphabet. Now, second half is more focused on, instead of these large value companies and this AI wind has kind of moved towards more towards small cap companies. The smaller cap companies, they are represented by the small cap index, which is called Russell 2000. And there are different catalysts that why we feel that the smaller index or the smaller market cap index is expected to perform well. One, um, US is currently going through a rate cut cycle, which has started with the current rate cuts in last 18th of September. The central bank of US cut down the interest rates by 50 basis point. So we saw a decline in interest rates of US by 0.5%. Smaller market value companies, they are more benefited by rate cuts, because majority of the index which you see, um, it is based on and the majority of the sectors which we see in the small cap index, the dominating sectors are biotechnology and financial, these two. And biotech sector is a very capital intensive sector. It requires a lot of capital so that these biotech companies, they can do research on developing new drugs or expand. And because it's a capital intensive industry and funds are required to do consistent research, and most of the companies in the small cap index are biotech companies, it only makes sense that if interest rates are cut down, which means if loans become more cheaper, these smaller market value companies could borrow more, because anyways they have higher debt levels, they borrow more money, and in a cheaper interest rate environment, these kind of companies will flourish more, because their interest rates, the interest which they have to pay is less, and they can borrow more money, they can do more research on these drugs, and then try to expand and develop more. So that is the reason why in July, um, between 10th to 19th July, we saw a 7 to 8% increase in the small cap index. And the major sectors which moved were financials, followed by utilities, followed by consumer discretionaries and telecom and others. But small cap is particularly made of financials and biotechnology more. And as we know that, again, biotech stocks are more capital intensive, so they require extra funding. They need to take more loans to speed up a drug development or expand their operations and whatnot. So same goes with different other areas also, other sectors like Bitcoin miners and crypto companies, gold mining companies, for example. Because in a lower interest rate cycle, people tend to buy more gold. They are more attracted towards gold-based investments. Even now, also, if you see, gold prices have jumped. So these are the sectors which can be looked into. We can always learn more about these companies. There are these portfolios of the companies which you are looking into. So the companies called New Fortress Energy, Ligand Pharmaceuticals, FM Holdings, Halozyme Therapeutics, Marathon Digital, or Clean Spark, or Psycho. These are some of the smaller market value companies, and again, they belong to different sectors. So, because of a lower interest rate environment and historically the way they have performed in Trump era, if Donald Trump becomes the president and at the same time there is a rate cut cycle going on, that might just push these smaller companies higher. So if you see the potential price appreciation in a lot of this, 45%, 18%, 22%, 35%, and the Bloomberg analyst recommendations we are looking at, and the price appreciation potential is really huge in these kind of smaller market value companies. Of course, the risk lies there, but if you see these companies, I mean, some of them are global energy infrastructure. Um, some of them have declared very good earnings before interest and taxes. Their net income have increased. The current financial year is projected to bring more sales. The growth forecast is better. It is set to increase by 2025. And again, these kind of companies, especially the one which we're talking about right now, New Fortress, they have expanded the natural gas usage. And even in Brazil, this company is constructing 2.2 gigawatts of power plants, planning an IPO, indicating a strong growth prospect. So, um, as we can see that a lot of these smaller market value companies, they tend to grow in the future in an environment where they get more and more advantage. Like for example, if we know that smaller market value companies, their debt levels are really higher, so a lower interest rate environment really favored them. So, and we have seen that how small cap index have actually progressed further. Let me just show you before we leave. Let me just show you how small cap index has actually moved in last 4 or 5 months. Let me just show you, uh, sharing my screen with you on a live platform. So let me open US small cap. Let me show you how 2024 has been for small cap. Look at this increase so far. Look at this. It's completely at the uptrend. And if I show you, especially in July, see what July looked like. This was July. Just went up from 2040 to all the way the highest 2300. Phenomenal increase, right? 10 to 11% increase in just a short span of time. Came down, again bounced back, came down, again bounced back, and now it's here. So could be a good buy on dips when we are looking at the small cap index, guys. So we will see a lot of movement happening in this particular index also. Right. So that being said, again, it was a great time discussing today uh, the impact of US elections. I think we have covered a lot of literature today. And if you want to understand more about the impact of US elections on your portfolio, definitely reach us out one on one, and we can sit and discuss with you in detail that how this happens. We can discuss more on US elections, of course. In 1 hour, there is only limited which we can cover. But if you liked our session, please go on Google reviews, Century Financial, and do give us a feedback. It really helps us, motivates us to keep these sessions going on. In the month of September, every single day we have conducted one session, and tomorrow we are going to have one more session on trading on commodities, and we'll also talk about corporate earnings in the coming few sessions. And it's going to be around 7 to 8 p.m. tomorrow night, and I'll see you definitely tomorrow with a different topic. And I hope that today's session was fruitful. There are a lot of these PDFs and portfolios which we have prepared for the clients, and we just love to discuss this with you over the call or one-on-one, or if you would like to come to the office and meet us. And like this, we'll continue to bring more interesting topics for you. And tomorrow we are going to meet once again on a different topic, 7 to 8 p.m. Do not miss out. And if you have missed out on any previous sessions, you can go on our YouTube and look at the previous sessions which we have conducted. And I hope that it's worthwhile your time. And thank you so much once again for joining today. My name is Yogesh, and I'll see you once again tomorrow, same time, different topic. So you have a good night ahead.